Alright, man, peace. So now this is going to be the return of the series responding to your comments. I've not done an entry on this series in a long time, and I'm going to start to bring it back, especially as I start to speak on more diversified topics. I just have not had the time to cover a lot of these issues, but that's going to come. But I'm going to start with this video here, which is with the Sister Shahrazad Ali. As I state whenever I do an entry in this series pertaining to the black woman, explaining liberal black women, the reason why I like to use many of her speeches as a backdrop is because she acts as an informant over her own demographic. I like to use so-called black females like her who address the truth about the so-called liberal black woman, because it takes away a lot of that gender war nonsense, a lot of that energy that galvanizes the so-called black man versus black woman war, or pseudo war, that's really a byproduct of feminism. Once again, this quote-unquote pseudo war between the so-called black man and the so-called black woman is really a byproduct of feminism, the so-called feminist movement. And fortunately for this sister, she was astute enough to address it. And as I've stated in the past, I'm sure that she has a brain trust of so-called black men who assist her in being able to understand a lot of the things that's going on. And I'm not trying to take credit from her at all. In the same way that when a man humbles himself to the Most High opens up his wisdom. In the same manner, a woman, when she's receptive to and honors the masculine principle, and the Most High rewards her with a wise man, that amplifies her own wisdom. And that gives her the ability to speak on certain issues pertinent to her. So that is why I believe that this lady right here is so effective as a speaker pertaining to the issues surrounding the liberal black woman. Because as I tell you, brothers, incessantly, the liberal black woman is not your friend, man. 95 to 98% of these black women are liberal. And the liberal black woman is not your friend. They've been poisoned by many of these toxic ideologies. And the only way that they're going to be able to get help is when the so-called black man solidifies his understanding of who he is, so that we can bring forth a unified front towards the so-called black woman. Right now, the so-called black woman, the liberal black woman, let me specify, is able to muddy the waters. She's able to create chaos in this environment because she knows that the so-called black man is not on one accord. Since, for the most part, our so-called community has no uniform code of conduct or culture. The super liberal, the super liberal Marxist black woman knows that for the most part, if the so-called black man that she's with is not going to tolerate her dumb shit, she can go to somebody else. And the vast majority of these so-called black men are simps. There's no doubt about that. Many of these so-called black men are simps, the vast majority. And it's a damn shame. But a lot of them are starting to wake up. So now let's see what some of these comments state. This brother here, General Tito, says, COJ, let's not forget that in the 1980s that she had to have a full detail of Fruit of Islam security due to death threats from black women. I'm sure that she did. I'm sure that she did. And let me add on, I'm sure that she was receiving death threats from liberal black men also. A lot of these simps, they get very, very upset whenever you address the so-called black woman. That's why that matriarchal paradigm that's set up in the so-called black community is so insidious, man. It has to be destroyed. If the so-called black man does not use better scrutiny in establishing his own quote-unquote nuclear family, you're contributing to the problem, because now that we know that the so-called black woman is dealing with many of these toxic ideologies, we'd be a fool to keep doing the same things over and over and over again. So we have to recalibrate our conduct and adjust this environment. We can't leave it up to the so-called black woman. The woman in general is going to conform to her surroundings. That's part of their survivalist DNA. The woman is a survivalist. She's going to survive. If you place a woman in an environment that is alien to her, the first thing that she's going to do is search out who has the most power and supplicate herself to him. I promise you that. I don't care what race the woman is. And I don't care what race the man in power is. That is the first thing that she is going to do, because they are survivalists by nature. So this brother, Theory J, says, unfortunately, women like this queen no longer exist. Well, no, there's still sisters out there like that. There's decent women out there like that. Not quite on her level, but they're out there. You know, like I said before, the same way that you have a Bigfoot somewhere out there, a Chupacabra somewhere out there. You just need a pair of binoculars. You know, that's all. And a drone, maybe a satellite. You find one. Let me check out some of these replies. So no, they do. They're just scarce. Yep, I agree. They're just scarce. This brother Dark Void said, I hope they stop being that way and stop letting white feminists, aka white supremacy, manipulative and control their life and rise up. Well, brother, that's not going to happen. That's part of the problem. The so-called black man keeps waiting for the so-called black woman to change. It's not their job to change. It's our job to change. We have to change, and we have to engineer our environment and engineer them. Once they understand that there's certain shit that we're not going to tolerate, that we're not going to take, they're going to be forced to change. Okay? In the prison system, when the prisoners want to get something changed, what do? They'll resort to hunger strikes and things of that nature so that they can call attention to what they want to have done. The so-called black man, you're going to have to show great discretion, great discipline. You might have to turn down certain women who try to hit on you. But I don't think that brothers are on that level, man. I don't think brothers are on that level to marginalize the so-called black woman in that way. Because so many black men have been trained to worship and venerate the so-called black woman. That's part of the problem. That matriarchal paradigm is a major, major problem. And the so-called black man is going to have to find a way around that to stop subjecting himself to that paradigm, to that energy. It's up to you. It's not up to them. This brother Ness said, I know, bro, but as Judas said, and I agree, the so-called black woman don't even want to look up to the so-called black man anymore. Well, you know what, brother, you have to give them something to look up to. The so-called black man has to give the so-called black woman something to look up to. That's not to say that they will anyway. You could be an upstanding man. And the way that many of these so-called black women and women in general, because the liberal aspect of this society is pervasive in every race of woman, the westernized woman in general. But with the so-called black woman, it's exacerbated because of the fact that we have no culture. And it's up to the so-called black man to reinstall and reinstill that. And it's really not that difficult once you understand what's going on. It's really not. I say this all the time. Life is not easy, but it's pretty simple. The difficult part is understanding how to accomplish the simplicity. That's the difficult part. He says, some is on us, but still they don't even look towards black males for leadership, only for Rod. Well, you know what? It's because that's what you allow. That's why I stated earlier. Some of you brothers may have to consider telling the black woman no. Maybe you have to tell them no. The reason why they don't look to many so-called black men for leadership, only for Rod, let's be for real. A lot of brothers, that's all they advertise. Many so-called black men love talking about how well they could put it on a chick. But they don't have any real end game to where our people need to go. Let me say this also. A lot of you so-called black men who are woke, so-called pro-black, you love to follow behind these so-called black women and these protests that they're leading. The so-called liberal black woman is leading most of these protests, and you follow behind her. That's a very poor example that you're setting for your son. You're telling your son that you're going to be following a woman for your entire life. First, you're going to follow after your mother, then you're going to follow after your wife. That's a sign of weakness. The so-called black woman has to grasp and understand that when she searches out for attention, when she tries to lead these protests, when she looks behind her, there should not be any black men there. The black man has to say, look, yes, we need to do this, we need to do that, but we need an end game, and you have to follow behind me. That's the bottom line of it. You're not going to lead any revolution because Let me tell you this. If you allow the so-called black woman to lead these protests and these movements, that's going to trickle over into the household. How are you going to tell her it's okay for you to lead a movement, but it's not okay for you to be in charge of the household? Of course, she's going to carry that mentality into the household. So once again, so-called black man, you have to get your head out of the black woman's ass, man. It's very important. You have to let go of that simp shit. A lot of you guys are simps. Let's see here. Zoostar Dreams Experience Mindful stated, let's put it out there that me and you wish that there are many for me and you, maybe just not in the USA. Well, to be honest with you, to be very honest with you, that is an alternative for many so-called black men. There are many beautiful women of color from outside of this Western civilization paradigm that we live in. But even they are starting to become adulterated. A lot of brothers look to women of color from West Africa or parts of the Caribbean or South America, but a lot of those women are also becoming opportunists. They're becoming more and more liberal as we speak. It's a contagion that is spreading all across the world. So, once again, like Arnold Schwarzenegger said in Predator, if we don't make a stand now, there'll be no one left to get to the chopper. Oh, man. I'm sorry. I just watched Predator last week. That line is still stuck in my head. That's one of my favorite action movies as a child. Anyway, point being is this. So-called black man, you have to make a stand, man. You can't just sit back and hope the black woman's going to change. Why should she change for you? She's above you in this society. That's a fact. In this society, the so-called black woman is above you in general. In general. Now, we know that overall, the so-called black man has a higher ceiling than the so-called black woman in this society. But he also has a lower floor. The so-called white man, he's much more likely to look out for the so-called black woman than he is for you. That's just the bottom line of it. Why is that? Because the woman is not a threat. No woman is a threat to a kingdom or to an empire. This brother Young Dens, he said something very intelligent. He said, well, raise your daughter up that way then. That's why I state, once again, so-called black man, it starts with you. Are you one of these guys at home putting a basketball in your daughter's hand? Or are you trying to stress to her how important it is going to be for her to be a wife and a mother? If she wants to work, she could work. But once again, the most important thing that the woman will ever do in this life is be a wife and a mother. And I'm sure that many liberal females who might be listening to this video will disagree. Oh, well. My channel is a pro-truth channel geared towards the so-called black man. Get over it. Let's see here. This person, Lafa Turtles, talking to somebody named Shakalanka. You're what she spoke up in the video. Just another bitter, confrontational deflector. Once again, brother, stop going back and forth with any of these liberal females on the channel. I told you already. I take out the trash. If I see people on my channel in the comments trying to go back and forth in fruitless banter, what I call the circular race talk or the gender war, let me take care of it. Don't waste your time. A lot of you so-called black men have been trained to go back and forth with people all day like women in fruitless conversations that lead nowhere. It's good to have debates as long as people have facts on their side. But a lot of you guys have been trained to go back and forth in empty banter. That's only meant to raise your ire. It's not worth it. This brother here, Trey Lawrence, said a good black woman is hard to find. That's an understatement. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? Oh, boy. So Giovanni Alexander got mad. He said, please stop. Black women say the same thing about black men. If you're looking for a woman in the club, bar, or online, then you get what you ask. Sir, I agree with you. I agree with you. The problem is that there are no real conventions set up in the so-called black community for young men and young women to meet and actually have something in common that is of depth. Because once again, our people don't have a strong culture. So they normally meet at parties and at the club, things of that nature. I'm sure that people will say, well, what about church? Well, church is one of the places that instills the mindset of venerating the woman. And I'm going to be addressing that sentiment when I start to revisit the Black Church Problem series. I do have to get back to that. But the church has always been set up, or at least in the last 60 years or so, to promote the woman over the man. Particularly in the last 40 years, as the Black feminist movement has given the woman so much more clout in the household through the job system. Remember, the church is a business, so they have to cater to whoever's paying more tithe money. Okay? And it's not even just in the church system. Many of these other religious groups and so-called Bible groups, they also cater to the woman because the woman is providing more tithe money. But I agree with what the brother Giovanni Alexander stated. You have to consider where you meet the woman. If you meet her at the club, it most likely means that she's loose. That's what it most likely means. So you're going to have to consider whether you're going to treat her as a concubine or a concubine. Because it's going to be very, very hard to believe for me that you're going to meet a wife material woman in the club. But then again, hey, you never know. Let's see here. Trey Lawrence responded back, look, women should already know their place, but the way this society is, they'll never understand that. If you're expecting me to adjust my stance, that's not happening. I agree with you, bro. Once again, it's up to the so-called black man to raise his daughter with an understanding of the importance of her role as a wife and a mother. That's your job. If you have a daughter, it's your job to do that. Noir Black said you can meet a woman at work, school, or anywhere else. That's not a bar or club. In this society, they've been told all their lives that they're not supposed to bow down to any man. They're taught that they're supposed to argue with men. I agree. He's saying it's extremely hard to find a woman who doesn't have that mentality. Yes, because that's the culture of America. The culture of America is woman worship, the veneration of the mother goddess, and Thelima, meaning do what thou wilt. As I touched on in one of these Nike Kaepernick videos, that term or that slogan that Nike has, just do it, all that is a reinterpretation of the Aleister Crowley slogan, do what thou wilt. That's all it is, because the founder of Nike, Phil Knight, is a Saturnian, as are all the top athletes at Nike. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Serena Williams, Tiger Woods, all of them venerate Saturn, every last one of them. And just about all of them are monarch athletes. Let's see here. P. Word says she read her book years ago and she is a very wise woman. Lou Ptolomeo said, I'm white. I know you don't speak I know you don't speak to me, but man, you're so on. You need to be on TV. Actually, no, I don't. I'm good. I'm good where I'm at. The voice, the stop, pause. The voice, the style, I love it all. If you had merchandise, I would buy it. I gotta pause you on that previous sentence. Brothers always ask me about selling t-shirts or something. Let me check some of these responses. TJ Scott said, I don't know what he looks like, but I know he has a voice for radio. I listen to this channel all day. He talks about the same things that my dad teaches me. That's good. That's good. That means you have a leg up on a lot of the things that's going on out here. That's why, once again, so-called black man, you must protect your seed, man. Your seed is the most important thing that you create. I'm not even talking about your children. I'm talking about your sperm. Even before it gets delivered, it's the most important thing that you have, man. All right? The so-called black man's sperm is worth its weight in gold. People might laugh or snicker at that. But the so-called black man is a multi-billion dollar, borderline $1 trillion industry. The so-called black man is just him. when you consider sports and entertainment, also the prison industrial complex, and his contributions to the armed forces. The so-called black man is irreplaceable. That's why they analogize the so-called black man as a chimp, a gorilla, a bonobo, and an orangutan in the classic Planet of the Apes series. I'm talking about the most recent one, the trilogy, where when you watch it, it's very obvious that not only are they telling you that the so-called black man is who they're talking about when they speak about the apes, but also that we're the people of the book. All you have to do is watch the film, this last trilogy, and they're letting you know. The character of Caesar is a metaphor for Moses. And in the first film, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, he even plays a Moses-Christ hybrid figure. But I'll be going through those movies very in-depth in the future. I've been talking about that for a while. I just need time to handle that. But it's very transparent what those films are actually about. Lord Destro says they wouldn't allow Chronicles of Judah to be on television. I agree with you, bro. I agree with you. They'd try to swing on me probably. if I sat down with on the panel with Stephen A. Smith and Molly and Max. Because see, Stephen A. Smith, he understands a lot of the same things that I understand about Max Kellerman. But he can't say it on TV. Once again, Stephen A. Smith is a Boule Negro. Boule Negroes understand that they are directly in interaction with the super liberal Caucasian Jew. The Boule Negro receives his orders directly from the super liberal Caucasian Jew factions, the Marxists. So Stephen A. Smith already understands the order. He's above Max Kellerman on the show, but in the overall societal hierarchy, Max Kellerman is above him. And Stephen A. Smith knows that. So there's certain things that he cannot say on that show. Stephen A. Smith is above Molly Karen, but if he were to say something that could be deemed quote-unquote misogynist, she certainly could get him suspended, if not fired. He's the #1 sports personality on ESPN, and just about any female on that network could get him fired if what he said was deemed to be quote-unquote insensitive enough. Let's see if Faith Forever said, when people get on television, they have to usually compromise their beliefs. Television isn't ready for this realness. Television is not based on the truth. Television is based on propagating propaganda. That's why it's called programming. Okay? You watch a program. It's meant to teach you how to think. The design of the computer is based off of the design of the human brain. In the same way that a computer can hold an unbelievable amount of files, it pales in comparison to the human brain. Everything that we experience from the time that we have any form of consciousness is stored away in the human brain, all the way from just about from inception all the way to death, or at least until the formulation of the brain in the womb, all the way to our death is stored in our brain. That's why we go through that instance where upon death they say that your life flashed before your eyes, because that's your brain providing a snapshot of everything that you've experienced in your entire life, because it stores everything away. The brain is truly a wonder. There's no way that the brain was created by happenstance. There has to have been a grand architect, a grand creator, a grand engineer. So when you get a lot of these so-called black atheists who talk about how could you believe in a God, how could you not believe in a God? But I'll be covering that sentiment in another video. It's just foolishness. Let's see here. It says, Born in the 804 says, white liberal women are out of control too, but you're spot on. Oh, they're absolutely out of control. All women are out of control in this society. But it's up to the men to put them back in control. See, what they've done is they've demonized a lot of the men in the Middle East for the Sharia law. They say, look at how they disrespect their women. They say, oh man, they stone their women. They behead their women for doing certain things like adultery, things of that nature. Well, compare however many women get killed over in the Middle East for infracting upon the Sharia law compare that to the amount of women in the Western civilization that get killed because they have no regard for who and what they are, and they throw themselves into dangerous situations because we live in a relatively lawless society in regards to how the woman is moderated. And certain people might not like that or understand that. But the woman has to be moderated. It's just a fact. Just like you moderate a child, you have to moderate the woman. If you don't, all hell gonna break loose, man. And that's what we see here in this society. That's why people are all strung out on antidepressants. Like 70% of these people are strung out on antidepressants, especially the adults. Okay? Like they talk about the Caucasian being strung out on crystal meth and a lot of these antidepressants and opioids and what have you. A lot of these liberal black women are on antidepressants also. Okay? Remember one of my brothers, he told me he was chilling in the whip and some fine broad walked by and he tried to holler at the broad and she was getting upset with him. And I told him, I said, the reason why she was getting upset with you is because she probably was on her way to the pharmacy to pick up her antidepressants and just making her late, man. A lot of these broads, they go home, they drink a glass of wine, they pop a couple of Prozac or whatever the hell they popping. They grab the vibrator, knock themselves out. Straight up, man. Let's see here. His brother said, no one is so-called white, you're an Edomite. Let's see. Family's not racist or racially biased. He's critical of everybody. Nobody's immune. He goes hard on so-called black men, women, white men, whatever. This is a pro-truth channel. Okay? This is a pro-truth channel. This is not a pro-black channel. Certain people might get upset when I say that. Why do I say that? Do I believe that the so-called black man should not treat his own with preference? Of course you should. My issue with the so-called pro-blacks is that they're all talk. They're all fluff. They have no end game. Most of them are idiots. They're not built to lead whatever they claim to be leading. And they want to avoid building the foundation because it's more glorious to build the roof. Of course, you want to get on TV and you want to march and chant and get attention for yourself. But if you really were concerned about starting anything of substance, the first thing that we have to do is instruct the young men. But because generation upon generation of so-called black people have been trained to worship and venerate the woman, including the woman being trained to venerate herself and falling prey to this quote-unquote strong black woman archetype. This is what is stopping our people from restoring what's relevant and what's important. That's why I tell you, brothers, you have to look upward to the Most High. You can't be concerned about what's going on in this fleshly world. All right? When you have your mind on the right things, things will be far better for you. And you'll be able to maintain proper perspective on life. A lot of you brothers fall in love with the woman because you treat her as a god. Shit don't work out and then you spaz out. And you lose your job. You think about killing the woman, killing yourself, killing your child if you had a child with her. All this craziness, man. And it's because you did not have the right perspective in the first place. The Green Love said we are one people under God, our creator. That's a personal philosophy. Let's see here. TV is a dying paradigm of throw it at the wall and see if it sticks for 15 minutes. Driven by cash, those ad checks. No, not quite. TV is actually a mechanism for spell casting, sir. That's what TV is. TV is a method for spell casting. That's why all the networks utilize Luciferian symbology. CBS has the eye of Heru or the eye of Ra. NBC has the peacock. Many of you might not know the peacock is one of the symbols of the mother goddess Hera. Okay? So on and so forth. All of these networks utilize Luciferian symbology to show you what they're actually about. You also have Columbia, the mother goddess, for CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System. Columbia is the name for the mother goddess. That's why she holds the divine light, the torch in her hand. That's what the Statue of Liberty represents, the mother goddess. Okay? One of the names, one of the manifestations for the mother goddess was Hecate. spelled H as in Harry, E. C as in Charles, A. T as in Thomas, E. Google Hecate, you'll see that is the Statue of Liberty. That's what they do. They hide it in plain sight, right in front of you, the goddess of witchcrafts. America was created based on witchcraft. What you call masonry is just Luciferianism. That's all it is. They're just black magicians. That's why they always wear black. Okay? Their main god is Pan, the so-called goat god, meaning the hidden one. Like for you brothers that read the scriptures, when you read Isaiah, I believe the 13th chapter, also the 34th chapter, it mentions the satyrs or the satyrs, spelled S as in Sam, A-T-Y-R. Why is the image of the half man, half goat always associated with the devil? That's symbolic. It's representative of Pan. It's representative of the divine architect of the apostasy, aka Cush. When Yahushua speaks of having the lambs or the sheep on his right-hand side and the goat on his left-hand side, that's symbolic of that dichotomy on a multitude of levels. Remember, we have the scapegoat. The scapegoat carries the sins of the people. So the goat has always been symbolic with sin. And then, of course, when we read Daniel, the 8th chapter, the rise of the Caucasians started with who? With Alexander the Macedonian, who symbolized as what? A goat. Right? So that term Satyr or Satyr, it just means hidden one. That's where we get the term Saturday from. On Saturday, we have what's called the quote-unquote Black Sabbath, which is in reference to what? The planet Saturn. Right? What's the constellation that's associated with Saturn? Capricorn, right? Which is what? Half goat, half fish. In reference to Oannes, or as he's known in the scriptures as Dagon, the fish god. Why is that? Because in the story of Asar, he was thrown into the waters and he emerged half fish. You also have the half fish god in the Hindu religion known as Vishnu, who's a representation of Noah. Right? The name Vishnu literally means the man of rest. Right? The name Noah means rest. The name Vishnu, I believe in the ancient Sanskrit, they add a V onto the start of many of the words that come from the original language. So it's actually Ishnu or Ishna. Of course, in Hebrew, the word Ish is man. Right? Na or Noach in the Hebrew is what? It means rest. Look up the god Vishnu. Shows you half man, half fish. And he normally has the hexagram on his forehead. As I tell you, brothers, these ancient gods of these pagan religions, quote unquote, they're oftentimes just amalgamations of the great men that lived right before or right after the flood. That's how you get an understanding of what means what and who is who. But I'll be touching on that in